Now like to introduce Christel Brits. She's going to talk on the practical difficulties around penalties and interest. Christel is admitted as an advocate of the High Court and has obtained a BA, LLB and HDIP tax. She is the tax controversy leader for the Africa sub-area at EY and is based in their Johannesburg office. Before joining EY, Christel was head of Tax Avoidance Policy Division at SARS, where she was employed for 10 years. Christel was principally responsible for tax avoidance policy and operations, development, and writing guidelines. She is experienced in alternative dispute resolution, settlement negotiations at National Appeals Committee level, briefing senior counsel, and dispute resolution process management. Christel.
Well, actually, Johan had such a good story. I thought, well, what can I tell you that could just barely match it? And I think the one thing that stands out is my dad said to me as a little girl, well, you can't go and become an artist because you'll turn out weird. So I got the closest thing to that. I became a tax lawyer, and at least there's one similarity, and that's that it's, well, two, actually, it's very original, it's very creative. I think when we talk about penalties and interest, I think it's a difficult area for anybody. Anybody who's had a dispute with SARS lately will have dealt with it from some kind of a perspective. We're having a lot of problems on a practical level. Some of them we resolve easily, some of them take a lot of time. If we just take a step back and we look at the penalty provisions before the Tax Administration Act came into operation in 2012, I think it's fair to say that it really was very simple to understand. It was a simple process. It was much less formalistic. The penalties never seemed to really dominate the dispute the way that we see it currently happen. They couldn't levy, SARS couldn't levy penalties on a standalone basis, so your merits and your arguments were generally intricately enrolled into one process. There are also rules, obviously, but there was an opportunity to enter into agreement with SARS when there was a dispute about the penalties, and even in cases where there was evasion involved, you could enter into agreement with SARS. And I just think, as a first comment, it's probably controversial, but that's what I do, is controversy, is, you know, shouldn't one have something like an agreement in place again, where you can actually, you know, in a sensible manner, come up with a solution about penalties, you know, that just takes a lot quicker than what you're finding in practice. If we go to the Tax Administration Act, the whole idea behind it, obviously, is that the penalty provisions are contained in one space. It's across the board for all tax types. That makes a lot of sense. And there are 4 types to deal with. These are fixed-based, reportable arrangement penalties, percentage-based, and the most problematic from a practical perspective really remains the understatement penalties. And I'll tell you all about that. I'm not going to focus very much on the other penalty types, except a little bit on the percentage-based penalties. And then interest, I think the only real crisis we have is, in practice, it's not the only one, but one of the ones we keep on seeing is the fact that SARS often withholds refunds for a very long period. It's subject to a whole process. And you get only a 4% less than the official rate of interest. I mean, that really has an impact on taxpayers. The percentage-based penalties on the VAT side, obviously, is a 10% monthly penalty. These penalties are not very different from what we had before. It's just the whole structure, how it's imposed. You have to literally read the Tax Administration Act together with the underlying Tax Act, and it often creates difficulties. We see that both from a SARS perspective and from a taxpayer perspective. The construction of how these fit together.